Hello. So today we are doing array1, start1. So we start with two integer arrays, a and b, of any length, and we return how many of the arrays have 1 as their first element. So if both of them have 1 as their first element, we'll increment our count by, well, let's just actually go through the code and see what we can do here. So we're going to have a count variable called count. And we're going to set that equal to 0 to begin with. In other words, if none of the arrays have 1 as their first element, then we're not going to increment count. The only event in which we want to actually increment count is, of course, if either or of the arrays have 1 as their first element. So if we go in here and we say, okay, well, um, there's one thing to realize here. And the thing to realize here is that um, you can only check the first element of an array if, of course, it has at least one element. So 1 can't be the first element of any array, despite it being A or B, if, of course, it doesn't have any elements at all. So the only way in which this would work, in other words, if A or B dot length is less than 0, then, of course, I think we want to just keep um, keep our count to 0, because of course if a dot length or b dot length is in fact 0, then there are no elements in the array to begin with, let alone I mean, just completely forget it being 1, right? So if a dot length is essentially greater than 0, then and only then do we want to check the first element. And of course, if, of course, it is equal greater than 0, we want to check if a of 0 is essentially equal to 1. And if it is, we will increment count by 1. And that is all for our a. But of course, if b dot length is essentially, if b dot length is greater than 0, then what we'll do here is we will check if b sub 0, that is, of course, the first element in the array referenced by the 0th index, if that is equal to 1. And of course, if that is equal to 1, then we can increment count yet again. So after this process is sort of achieved, in that we have both, of course, we vetted through each of these if statements, which of course have nested if statements. We have sort of acquired a definite value for count. And after it's all said and done, I'm sure we can just return count, and then of course have a definite answer on our side. There we go.